Hare Krishna, my dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in the live studios in Hive, Kent, Southeast England, just near the English Channel. I had two very important, meaningful, and wonderful meetings today. And so I've been in a chair for more than 6 hours already. So I may cut it a little short tonight, but I cannot stop because, frankly, I am addicted. And I recommend highly that everyone get addicted to hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam out loud with the devotees. It's wonderful, it's miraculous, it's everything. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami glorifies this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, O singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Purāṇa Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho Kalidwandoditaditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Marika Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Andanamostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu Sadhu Tadayin Atini Chocheta Kara Hanamuncha Gadachin Mam Prem Narit Kantagyospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've reached the 10th chapter, which is the last chapter of the second canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And Shukadeva Goswami is continuing to answer the questions of Maharaj Parikshit, which, as you remember, were very deep and comprehensive and numerous. We're beginning with text 14. Just hear from me how the potency of his lordship divides one into three, called the controlling entities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies, in the manner mentioned above. Text 15. From the sky, situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, sensory energy, mental force, and bodily strength are all generated. as well as the sum total of the fountainhead of the total living force. 16. As the followers of a king follow their lord, similarly, when the total energy is in motion, all other living entities move, and when the total energy stops endeavoring, all other living entities stop sensual activities. Purport. The individual living entities are completely dependent on the total energy of the Supreme Purusha. No one has independent existence, just as no electric lamp has independent effulgence. Each and every electrical instrument depends fully on the total powerhouse. The total powerhouse depends on the reservoir of water for generating electricity. Water depends on the clouds depend on the sun depends on creation, and the creation depends on the movement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. That's a pretty nice analysis of what the cause of all causes mean. Text 17. The living force, being agitated by the Virat Purusha, generated hunger and thirst. And when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened. Purport. The process by which all living beings in the womb of the mother develop their sense organs and sense perceptions appears to follow the same principles in the case of the Virat Purusha, the sum total of all living entities. Therefore, the supreme cause of all generation is not impersonal or without desire. The desires for all kinds of sense perception and sense organs exist in the Supreme, and thus they take place in the individual persons. This desire is the nature of the Supreme Living Being, the Absolute Truth. Because he has the sum total of all mouths, the individual living entities have mouths. Similarly, with all other senses and sense organs. Here the mouth is the symbolic representation of all sense organs, for the same principles apply to the others also. Text 18. From the mouth, the palate became manifested, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence, so that the tongue can relish them. Purport. This gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, Adidaiva, in this case, Varuna. The mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all the different relishable juices, of which the controlling deity is Varuna. This suggests, therefore, that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue. The tongue and the palate, being instrumental, are adibhutam, or forms of matter, but the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is adidaiva, whereas the person undergoing the function is adhyatma. Thus, the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purusha. The four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles, namely the Adhyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhutam, as explained before. Text 19. When the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. when the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth, then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when the Supreme was lying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. Purport. The peculiarity of the gradual development of the different senses is simultaneously supported by their controlling deities. It is to be understood, therefore, that the activities of the sense organs are controlled by the will of the Supreme. The senses are, so to speak, offering a license for the conditioned souls, who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity deputed by the Supreme Lord. One who violates such controlling regulations has to be punished by degradation to a lower status of life. Consider, for example, the tongue and its controlling deity, Varuna. The tongue is meant for eating, and men, animals, and birds each have their different tastes because of different licenses. The taste of human beings and that of the swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. The swine accepts any kind of foodstuff, including stools, and a human being who has developed such indiscriminate taste must be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. Such a life is also God's grace, because the conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly tasting a particular type of foodstuff. If a man gets the body of a swine, it must be considered by the grace of the Lord, because the Lord awards the facility. After death, the next body is offered by superior control, not blindly. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he is going to have in the next life. An irresponsible life of indiscrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all scriptures. Text 20. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were created. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifested. Purport. The nasal instrument, odor, and the controlling deity of air, smelling, and so on, all became manifested simultaneously when the Lord desired to smell. The Vedic mantras confirm this statement in the Upanishads. The Vedic mantras confirm this statement in the Upanishad statement that everything is first desired by the Supreme before the subordinate living entity can act upon it. The living entity can see only when the Lord sees. The living entity can smell when the Lord smells, and so on. The idea is that the living entity cannot do anything independently. He can simply think of doing something independently, but he cannot act independently. This independence in thinking is therefore by the grace of the Lord, but the thinking can be given shape only by the grace of the Lord, and therefore the common saying is that man proposes and God disposes. The whole explanation is on the subject of the absolute dependence of the living entities and absolute independence of the Supreme Lord. Less intelligent persons, claiming to be on an equal level with God, must first prove themselves to be absolute and independent, and then they may substantiate their claim to being one with God. Text 21. Thus, when everything existed in darkness, the Lord desired to see himself in all that was created. Then the eyes, the illuminating God's Son, the power of vision, and the object of sight all became manifested. Purport. The universe is by nature dense darkness, and therefore the total creation is called tamas, or darkness. The night is the real feature of the universe, for then one cannot see anything, including oneself. The Lord, out of his causeless mercy, first desired to see himself and all the creation as well, and thus the Son became manifested. The power of vision for all living entities became possible, and the objects of vision were also manifested. This means that the whole phenomenal world became visible after the creation of the Son. Text 22. By development of the desire of the great sages to know, the ears, the power of hearing, the controlling deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing became manifested. The great sages desired to hear about the self. Purport. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, by advancement of knowledge, one should try to know about the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum of everything. Knowledge does not mean knowledge only of the laws of nature or physical knowledge, which are working by the direction of the Lord. The scientists are eager to hear about the physical laws working in material nature. They are eager to hear through the medium of radio and television about things taking place far away from them on other planets. But they should know that the power of hearing and the instruments for hearing were given to them by the Lord for hearing about the self, or about the Lord. Unfortunately, the power of hearing is misused in hearing the vibrations of mundane affairs. The great sages were interested in hearing about the Lord through Vedic knowledge and nothing more. That is the beginning of oral reception of knowledge. Text 23. When there was a desire to perceive the physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, hardness, warmth, coldness, lightness, and heaviness, the background of the touch sensation was generated, namely the skin pores, and the bodily hairs, along with their controlling deities, the trees. Within and outside the skin, there is a covering of air through which the touch sensation became prominent. Purport. The physical characteristics of matter, such as softness, are subjects of sense perception, and thus physical knowledge is the subject matter of the touch sensation. One can measure the temperature of matter by touching with the hand, and one can measure the weight of an object by lifting it with the hand, and thus estimate its heaviness or lightness. The skin pores, and the hairs on the body are all interdependent with the touch sensation. The air blowing within and outside the skin is also an object of sense perception. This sense perception is also a source of knowledge, and therefore it is suggested here that the physical or physiological knowledge is subordinate to the knowledge of the self, as above mentioned. Knowledge of the self can expand to the knowledge of phenomena, but physical knowledge cannot lead to knowledge of the self. That's with a capital S, by the way, in this case. There is, however, an intimate relation between the hairs on the body and the vegetation on the body of the earth. The vegetables are nourishment for the skin, both as food and medicine. As stated in the third canto, Tvacham asya vinir binam vivishur jishnam jishnyamoshadehi. Text 24. Thereafter, when the Supreme Person desired to perform varieties of work, the two hands and their controlling strength, and Indra, the demigod in heaven, became manifested, as also the acts dependent on both the hands and the demigod. Purport. In every item, we can note with profit that the sense organs of the living entity are never independent at any stage. The Lord is known as the Lord of the senses, Rishikesha. Thus, the sense organs of the living entities are manifested by the will of the Lord, and each organ is controlled by a certain type of demigod. No one, therefore, can claim any proprietorship of the senses. The living entity is controlled by the senses. The senses are controlled by the demigods, and the demigods are the servants of the Supreme Lord. That is the arrangement in the system of creation. The whole thing is controlled ultimately by the Supreme Lord, and there is no independence of either the material nature or the living entity. The illusioned living entity, who claims to be the Lord of his senses, is under the clutches of the external energy of the Lord. As long as the living entity continues to be puffed up by his tiny existence, he is to be understood to be under the stringent control of the external energy of the Lord. And there is no question of liberation from the clutches of illusion, Maya. However much one may declare himself a liberated soul. Text 25. Thereupon, because of his desiring to control movement, his legs became manifested, and from the legs the controlling deity named Vishnu was generated. By his personal supervision of this act, all varieties of human being are busily engaged in dutiful occupational sacrifice. Purport. Every human being is engaged in his particular occupational duty, and such activities are visible as men go hither and thither. This is very prominently visible in big cities of the world. People are going all over the cities with great concern from one place to another. This movement is not limited only to the cities, but is also visible outside the cities from one place to another, or from one city to another, by different vehicles. Men are moving by cars and trains, on the surface by subways, within the earth, and by planes in the sky, for the purpose of business success. In all these movements, the real purpose is to earn wealth for comfortable life. For this comfortable life, the scientist is engaged, the artist is engaged, the engineer is engaged, the technician is engaged, all in different branches of human activity. But they do not know how to make the activities purposeful to fulfill the mission of the human life. Because they do not know this secret, all their activities are targeted towards the goal of sense gratification without control. and therefore, by all this business, they are unknowingly entering into the deep regions of darkness. Because they have been captivated by the external energy of the Supreme Lord, they have completely forgotten the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and thus they have taken it for granted that this life, as presently manifested under the conditions of material nature, is all in all for enjoying the highest amount of sense gratification. But such a wrong conception of life cannot give anyone the desired peace of mind, and thus, in spite of all advancement in knowledge, by use of the resources of nature, no one is happy in this material civilization. The secret is that at every step they should try to execute sacrifices toward the path of world peace. The Bhagavad Gita 18:45 and 46 also advises the same secret in the following verses. Swe swe karmanya bharitak sangsiddhim labate naraha swakarma niratak siddhim yata vindaditach trinu yatak pravrtir bhutanam yena sarvamidang tatam swakarmana tamarbhyarcha siddhim vindadimanavaha. The Lord said to Arjuna, just hear from me how one can attain the highest perfection in life simply by discharging his specified occupational duty. Man can attain the highest perfection of life by worshipping the Supreme Lord and by performing sacrifice for the sake of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is all-pervading and by whose control every living entity, and by whose control, I'll say this again, sorry. Man can attain the highest perfection of life by worshipping the Supreme Lord and by performing sacrifice for the sake of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is all-pervading and by whose control every living being acquires his desired facilities according to his personal propensity. There is no harm in having different propensities in life because every human being is proportionately independent to chalk out the plan of his life by different occupations. But one should make it a point in his life to know perfectly well that he is not independent absolutely. One is certainly under the control of the Supreme Lord and under different agencies. Knowing this, one should make it a point that by his work and by the result of his labor, he serves the Supreme Lord as prescribed by the authorities, expert in the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. For performing such occupational duties of life, the leg is the most important instrument of the body, because without the help of the legs, one cannot move from one place to another, and therefore the Lord has special control over the legs of all human beings, which are meant for performing yagyas. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I'm going to stop here. It's 7:50. It's not too much earlier, but I need a little extra time tonight. So we'll stop here and we'll start tomorrow at text 26. And we're simply waiting in anticipation.
Okay, first, it's from Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Gopakanya Devi Dasi.
Jai Maharaj, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and cheers to all assembled sages.
Hari Bol, cheers to you.
And from Rati Manjari.
Hare Krishna Rati.
Jai Guru Maharaj, please go on blessing us by revealing the essential truths.
Well, I don't know how many times I have to say it. I'm just a peon delivering the mail.
From Bhakta Christopher.
Jai Bhakta Christopher, Haribol.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj and assembled devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
And from Rasika Shiromani.
Hare Krishna Rasika.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj and the assembled devotee hearers. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and the Bhaktivedanta purports. The flow of Krishna's mercy and the literary ecstasies of his divine grace, and our very means of conquest.
Jai, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
And from a comment from Bhakta Christopher.
Yes, Bhakta Christopher.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I was just reflecting on how crazy it seems that some people think of the Lord as being impersonal. Krishna resides in the hearts of all living entities. Therefore, how can he be impersonal? All things come from Krishna, and all things are for Krishna. I find myself thinking about this topic quite often. Thank you for another wonderful reading. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, I was thinking also during the reading, thank you, Bhakta Christopher, that, the creation is very complicated, and there's different levels of it. Mahavishnu, in the creation of the whole total material energy, and the souls are injected in time, and then the thing starts to change, and then there's a subtle, and that's outside of all the universe. That's before, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu enters in all the universes. And now we're in each universe, and the subtle creation, the Virat Rupa, is being manifested. And by the desire of the Lord, through this Virat Rupa, which is his subtle desire, all these different sense organs and knowledge acquiring senses, active senses, the sense objects, they're all being created one after another. And still, the universe isn't yet manifested by all this. We'll find out a little bit further on. I think it's in this section. It's either here in the third canto. That even the demigods that are created by these what the fundamental elements, the demigods that are in control of the fundamental elements, they're created along with the subtle elements. But at one point, they pray. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to do now. And then the Lord has to enter. That's a little bit further on. But it's all being controlled by the Lord. That's the point. Hare Krishna. Therefore, it doesn't make any sense not to sacrifice to the Lord, not to give devotional service to the Lord. Hare Krishna.
From Gauranga Gopal.
Yes, Gauranga Gopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I loved this part of text 22's purport. Quote, the scientists are eager to hear about the physical laws working in material nature. They are eager to hear through the medium of radio and television about things taking place far away from them on other planets. But they should know that the power of hearing and the instruments for hearing were given to them by the Lord for hearing about the self, or about the Lord. Unfortunately, the power of hearing is misused in hearing the vibrations of mundane affairs. Unquote. Thank you for engaging our sense of hearing in the proper way, Maharaj.
Thank you. May the whole world become addicted to it. Thank you very much.
And from Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati.
Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Tonight we heard a fascinating explanation on how our senses and their controlling deities are created out of the desire of the Lord to himself see, hear, feel, and so on. By the fact that there are controlling deities for each of our senses, we can understand that we are never independent, even though we can think that we are. But even that thinking power is by the Lord's mercy only. I found also interesting to hear how the living entity gets a license to enjoy a particular taste or not.
Yes, absolutely, that's correct. But there is a slight independence that the human being has, that the other living beings don't have in lesser bodies, and that is to desire to know, to desire to improve something. But even as you say, even that is under the control of the Lord. Or, put it another way, the fulfillment of that desire is under the control of the Lord. He's facilitating the devotees' desire, the living beings' desires. And when they become under the control of ignorance totally in animal and plant forms, then they lose that independence entirely. In the human form, there's a slight independence for desiring something that is progressive, or whatever you want to call it, different, let's say. But here again, this is still the subtle developments. It's like the blueprint is being designed and the ingredients are being, collected, and then eventually it'll all be put together, and then the universe, the planets and living beings will all come out from Brahma. Hare Krishna.
And from Daitari Hari.
Yes, Daitari Hari.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
We heard a very interesting point on the topic of free will. It was said that the Lord gives us the concession of being able to be independent in thought, but in order for any action to be actualized, we require His sanction.
That's it.
Does this mean that we only really have independence or free will on the platform of the mind? Is it that we only have a little independence on the platform of the mind? Because it seems like, as we heard in one of the later purports, that we each have different propensities. These propensities seem to be acquired traits we have due to our nature, so it doesn't exactly seem like free will.
First of all, you have to is there more?
There's more?
Yeah.
Is it fair to say then that our free will is entirely based on our choice to either desire to serve Krishna or our own senses? And from that point we become dominated either by the internal or external energy? And within that domination, under either of those two energies, we can only make very slight personal decisions? Sorry if my question is overly complicated.
Well, it can be sorted out if you understand that the desire is actually coming from the soul. The desire is not coming from the mind exactly. The mind is just a reflection of the desire of the soul. And then the body is the reflection of the desire of the mind. But the original desire is in living being. It's part of the existence of the living being to desire. So that's the individual, the slight independence that the soul has to desire the right thing. And then, when he desires the right thing, then all of these things come into to play. You know, when he desires something, then all of these senses are manufactured by the material energy in order to satisfy that particular desire. So it's right what you say, that when the soul is under the influence of the material energy totally, then predestination is true. But at the same time, the independent will is also there simultaneously within the soul. Therefore, the next verse in the 3rd chapter says that tattvavit tu mahabaho guna karma vibhaga yoho guna shivartanda itimatva nasajjate. This means that when one is given knowledge, and this also is dependent on the sanction of the Lord, but when he has this knowledge, and the knowledge has to come from outside the actions and reactions of material nature. As long as we're under the control exclusively of the modes of nature, then that knowledge of how to choose is not there. And therefore, in that conditioned state, when the senses are in a certain mode of nature, and the sense object is in the same mode of nature, then there's attraction or repulsion. So therefore, when you select a certain color, car, or a certain color of dress, or a certain color on the walls, that's not really your free will. It's just the modes of nature interacting. But once one hears from outside that chain of action and reaction of the material world, then one can see the difference. So that's where the free will of the soul is manifested in the conditioned state. And therefore it describes in that verse that he sees the difference between devotional service and sense gratification, and he chooses devotional service. Then he's free. Then he has free will. Even that free will is limited. It's tiny compared to the Supreme Lord's free will. But it's free will nonetheless, and the Lord will not interfere with that free will. The Lord, the living entity, must choose devotional service over sense gratification. But he gets the ability to do it by the knowledge that he gets from the Lord and the Guru Parampara, which comes from outside of the modes of nature. So yes, free will and predestination exist simultaneously. It's not either or. They're both in existence simultaneously. But the free will can only be awakened by hearing transcendental knowledge from the Vedic knowledge, wisdom. Hare Krishna.
From Subbarao Rajagopal.
Yes, Subbarao Rajagopal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances and all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you for daily reading service of Srila Prabhupada's books. In the purport 2.10.19, Srila Prabhupada says, quote, "The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature." Unquote. I remembered a verse from the Bhagavad Gita 15.9. Quote, "The living entity thus taking another gross body obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects."
Exactly.
In the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada writes, In other words, if the living entity adulterates his consciousness with the qualities of cats and dogs, in his next life he gets a cat or a dog body and enjoys. Consciousness is originally pure, like water. But if we mix water with a certain color, it changes. Similarly, consciousness is pure, for the spirit soul is pure. But consciousness is changed according to the association of the material qualities. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Thank you, Maharaj.
Perfect. That's a perfect explanation. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
And from Rati Manjari.
Yes, Rati.
It was mentioned also that when the human being chooses to eat without discrimination, he will be awarded a body of a hog in his next life, and enjoy eating stool. This, then, is also the mercy of the Lord. If I may ask a somewhat peculiar question, I have heard that some people praise the health benefits of drinking one's own morning urine. If I am not mistaken, it is even an Ayurvedic treatment. Personally, I am not sure what to think about this. Could you please elaborate?
It's like medicine. You know, there's certain, everything can be used as medicine. And yes, it is in the Vedas, but it only can be done under the guidance of an expert Ayurvedic physician. We shouldn't, drink our own urine in the morning thinking that, we can, in other words, we can't self-medicate. It's not a matter of self-medicating. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, everyone, for kind of cooperating with me a little bit tonight, because I need an early night. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Samavita Bhakta Brinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. See you tomorrow night, same time, same place, same topic, as the universe expands and we get a bird's eye view. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.